Well, good afternoon, everybody. Today is Sunday, May the 9th, and this is Life Matters. Let's talk about it. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Michele Johnson, and I am your host of Life Matters with Michele. I am so excited to have you, and you to join us. And I want to wish a very happy Mother's Day to every mother who is listening, who is watching, every mother out there. I want to especially send a blessing and a prayer out to those whose mothers are no longer with us. But I'm praying God's comfort and strength as you remember the life, the legacy, and the love of your mother. Today, we have with us very special guest, James M. LeBlanc, who will be talking about forgiveness on today. But before we do that, I want to remind you all, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments, and I will field them over to our very special guest. As a reminder, this is a platform where we talk about what matters in our community, and we just want to make sure that everybody is on point. Hello, James. Say hello to the people.
Hi, everyone. Happy Mother's Day. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, I've got to tell people who you are. It's a very, very special guy. Let me read your brief bio. James LeBlanc was born in San Francisco, California, biracial, adopted into a white family, and at 7, the child of divorce. James went through years of abandonment, abuse, addiction, incarceration, homelessness, and hopelessness. Finally, in 2007, James started to turn his life around, and through faith, mentorship, and hard work, he got sober, started a family, and finally experienced the miracle that opened him up and enabled him to experience the joy of life. A minister, motivational speaker, and corporate professional, James lives in Washington, D.C. area with his wife, Marshall, and their 2 sons. Welcome again to my very special guest, Mr. James LeBlanc. I'm so excited to have you on the show. Seems like forever since I gave you the invitation.
Yeah, I think it was like 6 months ago we booked this, and then suddenly it was here.
Suddenly it was here. Exactly. So I am excited to have you. I've had an opportunity to thumb through your work and just, have my mouth fall open and all of those good things. But we're going to talk about it today. But today, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about forgiveness. And for anybody who's walking in the flesh, who's walking in this earth, they understand that forgiveness is not always the easiest of tasks. And sometimes we say we forgive, but in actuality, we do not. So I'm going to ask James, what does forgiveness look like to you? What is your working definition? And then what do you believe, it should be, or what, even if I'm going to say this, what the Bible would say about forgiveness?
Well, I like to keep things simple, Michele, and forgiveness to me is just letting them off the hook. That's all it means. Just letting them off, taking them off the hook, and letting it go.
Wow. I like that. I'm going to write that one down, because a lot of people, we'll talk about this. A lot of people believe that forgiveness has to have so many layers to it. And for some people, let's be honest, it does. Because some people have to peel back a lot of pain. They have to grapple with the scars. They deal with all of the different things that caused them to get to a place of unforgiveness. And for you to say that forgiveness in simple terms is letting them off the hook
Mhm.
is amazing. And
Yeah.
I think that our listening audience should really just gather that in their heart and just really take that to heart, because in its simplicity, that's really all we need to do.
It's simple, but it's not always easy. But it is simple.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. And so I know that you've written a book on forgiveness, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you got to that point. But
Mhm.
let me ask you the hard question, if I can say that. What happened in your life that caused you to have to really get to a place of forgiveness? I mean, really get to a place of forgiveness.
Yeah, I walked around in resentment and unforgiveness for a lot of years, and it was a miserable way to live. And I see it on people today. I can just see it on them, the unforgiveness, the resentments, and it'll kill you. It'll literally kill you. So it's mandatory. It's absolutely mandatory that we forgive, and it's not fair. It's not easy. It's none of that, but it's something that we have to do. And for me, there were a few things that I was resentful about. I was resentful about being adopted. I didn't like that I had been given away. I had a resentment about that, and my birth mother, I had a big resentment against her, and I didn't really know it, but I did a lot of negative behavior behind that, including drinking, drugging, just whatever, doing whatever type of lifestyle, acting out in all kinds of ways, and I had to come to a place of forgiveness, and I also had to forgive myself. Those are the two big ones that
Yes.
freed me up. And I believe when you get free of that stuff, then the Spirit of God can really come in and work and guide you and lead you. But when you're all bogged down with all that stuff, it's kind of tough to walk in the Spirit. So that's what I had to do. Those are the two big ones. There was some other minor stuff that I had to take care of too, because I had to get all that stuff out. Because I'm the kind of person that's self-destructive. I'll use and I'll act out negatively behind that stuff. And so I had to get it all out. But those are the two big ones.
Okay, so when you say, so like I said, I perused your book. So you talk about you were adopted.
Mm.
So talk a little bit, because you mentioned in your bio that you're biracial. Talk a little bit about your family makeup, and when you started to discover that you were different, and then when you said you like to go over people's houses in the African American neighborhood or community, because you were like, you felt comfortable because, hey, they look like you, and to some degree, the
Hmm.
noses or the features or whatever. Talk to us a little bit about that, and that's going to build us up to where we're going.
I grew up in a white family. I was adopted by a white family. My mother and father both white. My brother and sister both also adopted, and they're both white. And I grew up in a white neighborhood in Berkeley, California, where I guess it's probably the best place for me to grow up. Berkeley was a very liberal place to live. There's a lot of different family makeups in Berkeley, so in that sense, it was good. But but there was a lot of identity issues for me growing up. I didn't look like my family. On back to school night, everyone else's family seemed to match, and I didn't match my family, and I really internalized that, and came to kind of think there's something wrong with me, and I didn't think it was fair. There's just a lot of things about life I didn't think were fair. You know what I mean? And so I acted out to that, and I acted out to that. I was the only black person in my neighborhood, and I still had a great childhood. I mean, for the most part, well, until the divorce and the abuse, and there's a lot of things that happened in our household that were very negative. Um, the neighborhood itself was great. I grew up in a really nice neighborhood, and I'm thankful for that.
So when did you find out that you were biracial? I mean, you said you didn't match your family, but something about you. made you understand that I mean, you're not particularly my skin tone. You're
Right.
not exactly lily white as either. My husband is actually your complexion, and so
Hmm.
he might be a little bit brighter. I don't know, but you all are bald head and you're fair skinned or whatever. But did you at any point um, embrace the Caucasian side of yourself, or you were just resentful
No,
because
I really, so I had an afro. I had an afro growing up, and I looked like a little Michael Jackson, and so it was very obvious. I mean, it was very obvious that there was some explaining to do here, and so but I always just identified as black. I'm not even sure why, because obviously everyone around me was white, so I guess it would seem natural that I'd be kind of embrace the white side. But for the most part, I was always just me. But if I had to pick, I would always pick black. Always identified as African American, black back then. Mhm.
so did that cause any struggles in your Caucasian family? Because you started identifying as black, although I believe you said your mother was white and your father was black, right?
So
Your biological.
my biological parents, my mother was white, my father was black. My adoptive parents were both white. It didn't cause any strain. I mean, they were very cool. I mean, down to earth people. They knew going in that this was going to probably be an issue, and they were kind of prepared for it. So it didn't cause any strain at all. No.
Mhm. Okay, so let's build up to your college years, or when your life went off the tracks. Now you said that because of some of the things you were experiencing, whether it was the abuse or the abandonment or what have you, what was it? Was it the alcohol first? Was it the drugs first? Because I know you were in a cell at some point in your life, and I want you to talk about that. That because as a counselor, when we talk to people, we try to get them to get to the root,
Mm,
right? So a lot of people will talk about surface issues and think that they're fine, but
mm,
evidently there were some root issues that you had, and they manifested, or the pain of it manifested through usage, substance abuse and all these different things. So at what point did that turn take in your life wherein uh, it became damaging and you found yourself in prison?
yeah. So I always felt there was something wrong with me. Like I always had this hole in my soul, so to speak, and I always sought some kind of escape. And I initially, as a child, I'd find it in books. Like I read a lot. I read, and that's a good thing, right, for a kid to be reading. But for me, it was, it was a form of escapism, right? And then as I got older and got big and bad enough to go out and see what was going on, yeah, there were a lot of drugs around, and I couldn't wait to start smoking weed and drinking like the big boys, and that's what that's what I did. But it's funny because I never really enjoyed it that much, but it seemed like all the cool people were doing it, so I kept trying, which was kind of stupid, really, because it wasn't me. I knew it wasn't me, and I didn't really enjoy it, but I kept trying, and eventually, and because I had such a low self-esteem and identity issues, I really didn't think I mattered that much anyway. So the damage I was doing, I didn't really think it mattered. So I tried everything. I tried anything that came at me. Whatever you had, I would try it. And eventually, in the mid '80s, crack hit the Bay Area, and I tried that, and I got hooked. That's what people do. They get hooked, and I'm no different. And so I was. This was even before high school, even before I graduated, and in fact, I walked the stage when I graduated with drugs in my pocket. I had the cap and gown on. I had drugs in my pocket, walking the stage like I was. I look back like it was just not good. So I went to rehab for the first time, and I was 18 years old, turned 19 in rehab, stayed clean a while, almost a year, and then I went back out, and I went back out for 24 years of pain and misery, and that took me from the West Coast to the East Coast, and eventually did land me in prison for 5 years.
Are you able to disclose what it was that landed you there, or is that off limits?
Um, I was doing things in order to get drugs.
Okay, okay. Understood, understood. I think we can all surmise or, kind of
Yeah.
guesstimate there's a plethora of things that you could have been doing to land yourself there. But I just wanted to, basically, because there are people who may be watching or listening who, find themselves or have found themselves in that posture and, letting them know that they're not alone and they're not the only ones who did it. And, things happen and we do things because, I was out there doing what I wanted to do, big and bad enough either as well. But I was a functioning,
Mhm.
alcoholic and, doing all the other things, that I dare not mention on this platform. Amen.
Yes.
But amen, amen.
Amen.
So so you landed yourself, you came to the East Coast. So let's talk about the forgiveness piece again. So when,
Mhm.
was it difficult? Because everybody's process of forgiveness is different. We talked about that at the top. Was it difficult? I know you said you just let them off the hook, but we both agree that letting them off the hook is one thing, but actually releasing it or bringing ourselves to a place where we
Mhm.
actually believe it, that we believe them. How did you do that? What was your process? Take us through some of the steps.
Yeah, okay. So, like I said, the two biggest ones were myself and my birth mother. Those are the two biggest resentments that I had. Myself, because although I did go through abuse as a child, and some things in life weren't fair, no one treated me as bad as I treated myself. I literally fed myself poison every day for years. No one did that except me. And so I did an exercise through a counselor where I spoke to the child, the little Jimmy, who's still in there. And inside all, I found out that inside all those big tough guys, there's still a little boy in there who's been hurt. The little boy before all the trauma and the pain and the drugs and the abuse. That little boy who's just smiling with the afro and just smiling at the world and loving life. He's still in there, and I hurt him, and I had to understand that. And so I wrote him a letter, and I read it to him. And basically, it was a letter of apology, and I apologize for treating him like that, for misusing him and not taking care of him, not protecting him, taking him to scary places. In that lifestyle, you go to some scary places. There's gunshots and alleyways and prison riots, and little Jimmy went through all that, and I had to write a letter of apology. And the hit, Michele, was when I told him, I promise I'll never treat you like that again. And that
Wow.
was a hit for me, and I've been able to keep that promise now, yeah, for over 9 years.
That is amazing because, people often say note to self or what would you say to your younger self?
Mm,
And I love the fact that you wrote an apology,
mm,
because we don't even think about that. I mean, yes,
mm,
we forgive other people, but forgiving ourselves is even harder because we're hard on ourselves. We fall into
mm,
condemnation, we fall into guilt and shame and all of these different things, and they each carry their own spirit with them. But for you to be able to um, apologize to your younger self, and
mm,
then everything you did to him, you know, with acting as if you're two different people, but it was one and the same. But
mm,
the fact that you were able to apologize to your younger self and say, I'm sorry for treating you like that, that is powerful. And I
mm,
hope that our listening audience is really taking that to heart, because we oftentimes forget about the person who was hurt initially. And
mm,
then we keep traumatizing them, or there's secondary trauma, or there's, the re traumatization of that inner self by our outer self or our bigger selves. And that is just powerful. And I want to applaud you for that, because
mm.
that is a blessing to come to that realization that you have to talk to yourself who you were,
Yeah.
and then to the person who you became down through it. So that is amazing. And
Mm. Yeah.
If I was near you, I would give you a big bear hug and be like, James, that is just wonderful.
Yeah.
Because it is. Um, there's a question coming from our audience that says, how did you survive forgiveness?
How did I survive forgiveness?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what
Some
that
people,
means.
some people don't forgive it. Like, say, for instance, they'll be so engrossed or entrenched in the bitterness, the
Oh,
resentment,
okay. Okay.
that they just don't survive it. They
I don't know.
live the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it wasn't anything. It was just God carried me through. I could have easily died many times. It wasn't that I survived it. It was just that God's grace kept me until I came to a place where, I could start to forgive. But
Yeah,
it wasn't because I was smart or tough, or God's grace. That's the only reason I survived.
yeah,
I
yeah.
know it wasn't me. I don't take any credit. I know better than that.
That's real humility right there. It really is. So let me ask you this. This is so good. Okay, so we're talking about forgiveness for those who are just tuning in. We're talking about forgiveness. And so you say forgiveness simply is letting people off the hook. We know that it's easier said than done.
Mhm.
Did you find yourself, and we all do it, so I'm not going to sit here and act like I've never done it. We've all done it. Did you ever find yourself saying, I forgive, but I don't forget?
Yeah, that's the tricky one, right? And that's because God says He throws all our sins into the sea of forgiveness, and they're forgotten and done away with. But we're not God, right? We're human beings
Come
who have
on.
been traumatized and once bitten, twice shy, and I'll forgive you, but stay away from me. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you do that to me again. And some of that is valid because we do need to protect ourselves, but if we truly let somebody off the hook, then how much are we going to hold them to that old stuff? It reminds me of Joyce Meyer, who said that who the famous minister Joyce Meyer, who
Mhm.
wrote the book Battlefield of the Mind, and she said that her dad was her dad abused her sexually for years, and
Mhm.
and when he got old, um, she was the only one that was able to take care of him. And what was she going to do? Was she going to, forgive but don't forget, and love him from a distance, or was she going to truly forgive, let it go, forget about that, and go ahead and take care of them? And that's what she chose to do. And the last years of their life were amazing. So I don't think it's a either or kind of thing. I think it can be both and there's some gray in that. Of
Yeah.
course, we don't want to forget if someone is abusive towards us, right? And we don't want to put ourselves in that position. But if we truly forgive, then how much do we also need to forget? So it's a tough one. But the other
Yeah.
one for me was my birth mother, right? And that was a tough one because I felt like I had been discarded, right? I felt like I had been given away, and that really made me feel like I was disposable. That's a word I use in the book. That's the
Yeah.
best word I can describe how I felt about myself, was that I was disposable, and that's why I fed myself poison and put myself in dangerous situations. Like, my life doesn't matter. I was given away at birth. Like, how much could I matter? And that's that victimization thing. Like, I was being a victim instead of
Yeah.
like um, taking life on life's terms, overcoming and moving on. I decided to sit in that victimhood place, and so with my biological mother, I I had a major resentment. I didn't really realize it until I started working with someone, until I started working with a counselor, and really digging this stuff out, and it surfaced, and I couldn't even talk about her without crying. Right? Us men don't even like to admit that, but I couldn't even, like, he'd ask me something, and I'd just start crying. I'm like, dang, I can't even. Something's going on here. I need to deal
Yeah.
with. And so I wrote her a letter too, and it was really it was very difficult at first because I knew that there were a lot of amends I needed to make because I had hurt a lot of people along life's way. But this is somebody I'd never hurt. I didn't do nothing to her. She gave me
Wow.
away. Why I got to apologize to her? And so
Mhm.
that was my sticking point. And I was counseled to just it was just suggested to go ahead and do it. It's more of a spiritual thing that doesn't really make sense to our mind. But the apology was for the resentment, for resenting her all my life, and
Yeah.
someone I didn't even know. And I just assumed that what she did, like I didn't even know the backstory. I didn't know why. Maybe she did this out of love. Maybe she thought this might be the best shot I'd have.
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe this was not an easy decision.
Yeah.
And so when I got all that out, because initially the letter, I'm not gonna lie, Michelle, the first part of the letter was like, how could you do this? Don't you know how this did to me? All that stuff I had to get out. But then I came to a place where I said, Mom, I know this must have been a difficult decision. And I even had some information from the adoption agency that said she was crying when she gave me away. Like I had chosen to ignore that piece, had knitted me a blanket and like all this loving stuff, as much as that she could do at the time as
Yeah.
a scared young woman giving away her child. And I had chosen to forget all that and hold on to the resentment. Because when I'm in my resentment, I can hurt myself, and in a weird way, it feels good. It's like a power that I have. And but if I forgive, then I don't have that excuse anymore. Right now, with this, I have an excuse to continue to, do drugs, do bad, not do well, lose at life, basically. But if I forgive her, then that wipes that excuse off the table. Now what do I have? Now I got to really live life on life's terms. So, but I chose to do it, and I let her know. I said, Mom, I forgive you. I know this must have been really extremely difficult. Um, I want to let you off the hook because I'm holding you to a standard that I can't even reach, and uh,
Mm.
and it's not fair. It's not fair that I'm holding you to this. And I hope one day maybe I can meet you and or even see a picture of you. And but for now, just I forgive you and I love you, and hopefully I'll see you in the next, in heaven. And well, I don't know if we want to get there, but then the miracle happened. I would see, because that's when I believe when I let that go, that's when I believe that God was like, all right, now we can work. Now
Yeah.
you ready. And because sometimes we want these blessings, but God knows we're not ready for them, and
Come on, sir.
it's not gonna go the right way. You know what
No,
I'm saying?
no.
So he's like, okay, now you've done some work. Now you ready.
Yeah.
And the blessing came. And at 48 years old, we found my birth mother. We found my whole biological family. That's a whole nother story. But I know it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't done that work, because I would not have been ready. And if it had happened, it would have went sideways. It would have went sideways. So 48 was when I was ready.
That's beautiful. But see, the thing is, God's timing is always perfect.
Yeah.
And so you may have, like you said, you may have jumped out there and tried to rectify the situation or tried to find people and go in there in your flesh and, launch out to people and, just start blasting people for how you felt.
Mm-hmm.
But God made it so because he wants to always make sure,
Mm-hmm.
Pastor Michele is coming out.
Mm-hmm.
He
Come on,
wants to
Pastor.
always make sure that he is not embarrassed and we don't bring a reproach on his name. And so there's always got to be an opportunity for God to be able to do something in you before he can do something through you, before he can do something to you. So we've got to provide space for God to do it. And so I'm so glad that you said, God said, now you're ready, right?
You don't make me run around this place. I'm gonna have to turn my camera off and take a lap because you preaching real good right now.
No, you got to do that. And the funny thing, James, is my message this morning was excuses, excuses. I'm gonna have to send you. I'm gonna have to send you that message.
Yes, please do.
Yes. But you said something that was very key. You didn't say it out loud, but I heard it in my spirit. That forgiveness is intentional. It's a choice.
Absolutely.
Every day you have to wake up, just like every day you have to wake up and choose God. Every day you have to wake up and choose salvation. Every day you have to wake up and choose your spouse again and again. You got to wake up and choose you and life. Forgiveness is an intentionality.
Yes.
It's not something that we get to. It's not what's the word? It's not selective. It cannot be a selective act. Forgiveness has to come from the Spirit of God through us, not through our flesh, because we will never do.
No, never. That was not in my plan. No. Yeah, but it's very intentional. Yes, it's very intentional. It's not a magic trick. Because I used to see these TV shows, and I know God is able, and He can do exceeding abundantly more than I can ask or think. There's no question. Like, look what He's done. But but I used to see these shows, and people would go down to the altar, get slapped with some oil, and they'd be good. And that's what I wanted, right? I wanted a magic. I wanted a trick. I wanted to be smacked sober. I wanted to be struck clean. And God said, "No, baby, you got some work to do.
You got some.
It took you 40 some years to get into this. We gonna, but you ready to dig your way out? Let's go. I'll work with you, but you got to do your part too." And that was the intentional piece, was to get in there with the tears and the work and the letters and the all that, exposing this to another person, because sometimes it's easy to say these things to God, but it's hard to say it to another person, right?
Yeah.
And that counselor.
Judgment comes.
Yes, yeah. You don't want to be exactly, Michelle. You don't want to feel judged, so we had to build up a level of trust before I could even let that piece out. There was a few months where we were just building trust, and then I was able to, so there was work. There was work involved, very intentional.
Absolutely. And the thing I love, you didn't say it directly, but again, I heard it in the spirit, is that humility gives God something to work with.
Oh yeah.
It gives somebody, when you stand in a posture of pride, and you don't want to tell anybody, and you don't want to cry, and you don't want people to know all your business. I mean, you laid your business out in this book.
I did.
You laid it flat out. So it takes a humble spirit to be transparent like that, because God needs something to work with. And He can work with a humble spirit. He can work with someone that says, you know what? This is what I did. This is where I am. This is where I was. But in order for me to get fixed, so that I don't go around bleeding on other people who may need my help, I got to humble myself under the mighty hand of God so that He can exalt me in due season, right? That's exactly what God said to me in my spirit when you were saying. He said, when you walk in humility, I can work with that.
I just mentally took another lap.
I just took my own lap. I
said, yes, Michelle.
Amen. But it's so true that a lot of people, they are unable to release the forgiveness because pride is in the way. If I forgive them, then they're going to think I'm weak. If I forgive them, they're going to think I'm crazy. If I forgive, get away from that, because the forgiveness is you getting, yes, you let them off the hook, but forgiveness is for you.
It is. And I see all these little slick sayings on social media and I don't know off the top of my head, but basically what people are saying is that that they've been hurt, but they're not saying it like that. They're coming off as being tough and as being like, yeah, if you come at me wrong, then I'll cancel you forever. You dead to me, no longer. And I'm like, nah, that's not it. You're not getting it. But you can't really. It's hard to tell people that because they're in their pride. But we do have to come to a place of humility where, you know what, I'm gonna let you off the hook. I don't need to get even. I don't need to plan my revenge, because that's all I used to do. I used to just get even. And you know what? Nah, I'm good. You got it. You got yours off, and that's fine, because I can't operate in that energy. If someone cuts me off in traffic, you got it. Now, Michelle, I'm not always like, sometimes I, get a little upset, but
we all get a little twisted. I'm like, did you just cut me off? Okay.
How dare you? But it was just my turn. But at the end of the day, I can't operate in that energy. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work. It's a bitterness. I get physically sick, and that's where a lot of sickness comes from. I know it's probably another show, but just walking around in unforgiveness and bitterness will literally make you physically sick. And I don't like being sick.
Absolutely, that's exactly what it does, because dis-ease creates disease.
Yep.
And so if we continue to, because if you think about people in your life, people that you've known, at work, church, wherever, and they're always sick. They got a cold. They always have back pain. They're always in this pain. They're always in the doctor. They now all of a sudden out of the blue they've got diabetes and all of these different things that come upon them. Sometimes you want to ask, okay, if you were perfectly healthy last year, now all of a sudden you're walking around with 5 new issues. Something is in you that needs to be extracted and destroyed. And so if you're walking around harboring ill feelings that manifest itself in unforgiveness, then certainly it's going to have an adverse effect on you physiologically. It's called somatic responses. So your body has a physical response to something that's happening. And so when you're starting to find yourself in a place of illness and all of this discomfort and all this stuff, you have to ask yourself, am I walking in unforgiveness? Have I not released something? And it could have been something as simple as on your job, somebody got the promotion and you didn't, and they didn't even know you were upset, but you're walking in this thing unbeknownst to them, and you resent them and they have no clue.
Yeah, they're going about their life, sleeping good at night.
Okay, eating a pork chop and a rib and no problem. You're trying to figure out what is going on.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my God, this is so good. So I know that you overcame your problems, with God, and counseling. Were there any other things that you had to mark your life with? Changing neighborhoods, you went from the West Coast to the East Coast. Any other things that you can lend to some of our listeners in terms of how you were able to overcome these difficulties, leading you to forgiveness again? We know that God, the grace of God, which is far exceeds anything that we can ever try. Were there any things outside of the grace of God and counseling that you had to employ in your life in order for this to work?
Well, I would say the maintenance. I mean, there's like you said, it's a daily intentional act of forgiveness, and I would also say that, I mean, if you want to see the miracles that God really has for you, then I would really encourage everyone to forgive and it's especially that person, that one that you were going to take to the grave with you, that person that you were never going to forgive, that one who hurt you, abused you, did you dirty, and it was no fault of your own. That person, that's the one you have to forgive. And once you do that, watch what happens. That's all I got to say. Put your seatbelt on and watch what happens. But it has to be that person, the one that's not fair, it's not right. What they did was terrible. That's the one you got to forgive.
Yeah. And a lot of people, in Christendom and just in general, we have this thing, what we call a blanket forgiveness. We just, sweep it across everybody, but we've not dealt with, like I said, the root of the thing. Because I can tell somebody, oh, I forgive you, but if I still think about it, then I haven't. If it still bothers me, if somebody else does it, then I haven't. If it becomes resident in my life at some point during the day, the week, of the month, I haven't. And so, yes, we cannot do these blanket forgiveness, cast a spell and I'm forgiving everybody. No, you have to do the work for each individual person that you need to forgive. I was an abused wife 24 years ago, and it took some work because I was beat. I went through every layer of abuse, and it took some work. Even to the point that now, like I tell my husband now, I said, I'm still sensitive to tones. So if somebody says something a certain way, I know that that's part of the scab. I'm not as bad as I used to because I couldn't stand anybody, a man raising their voice, even if they were preaching or they were like, it would really affect me. But every now and then I'll hear somebody whose voice a little 1 decibel above what I'm used to, and I'm like, what is that? And then I have to catch myself and say, release that, release that, release that. So here we are. Oh, this is so good. So where you are now, we know that you're married to beautiful Michele. You have 2 children. Do you now consider yourself to be a successful man?
I do, and it's not because of things, even though things have come. I used to live in jail cells and homeless shelters, and now I live in a 5-bedroom home, and it's not. And that's not to brag. I told you it's not. It's God. I told you I don't take any credit. But it's just the things that those things will come. But I don't think that necessarily makes you a success. I have peace today, and peace is for me is more valuable than anything. I mean, you see it every day. These celebrities with millions of dollars killing themselves or clearly unhappy. And don't get me wrong, I like to try it. I like to see, but but you see it. Things don't do it for you. But that peace of mind, I have a peaceful home. This home is my sanctuary, and that's a good thing too, right? Because we're kind of locked down for the last 15 months or whatever it's been now. But that peace, I think, is what makes me successful. And I think if it all went away and I could still have this peace, then I'd still consider myself to be successful.
Absolutely, and I love that. Because I often, my husband and I, we often say that our home is our sanctuary, so we don't let people in, that have a spirit against who we are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a pastor, he's an apostle, so we know we by the spirit. I'm like,
Yeah.
nothing's wrong with that right there. But the point is that peace, the PEACE, that peace component determines your success. Why? Because, like you said, if you have all the money in the world, when I first heard, when Robin Williams killed himself and all of these different things, people were like, oh my God, he was the funny guy. I had a friend of mine who hung himself, and he was the life of the party. But if you don't have that internal peace, whatever's going on outside is not going to matter. And so we have to learn how to adopt and to adapt to the peace that God is offering to us. And a lot of times our unforgiveness is because we've not accepted the peace that God is trying to give us, the peace that passes all understanding. Come on here.
Yes.
And so there's peace that we have to be intentional about. Again, it's not something that's just, yes, God says, my peace I give to you, peace be unto you. But in this flesh, which dwelleth no good thing, we have got to be intentional, even in peace.
Yeah, you have to do things that help to maintain that peace.
Yeah. I took a lap. Yep, I'm back.
And not do things. And there's some things I don't let in. Certain shows or certain music or people that carry a certain spirit with them. I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the Bible talks about protecting your eye gate, your ear gate, and I say your spirit or your heart gate, because if you let those things in, they can taint who you are, and it can throw you off kilter, and then you find yourself not pleasing God, then you find yourself, it becomes this, this domino effect. And so if you don't have peace, you got to find it, and then, like you say, find a way to maintain it, gain it and maintain it. Amen. You got to gain peace and maintain peace, because if you don't, the enemy has a field day. That's where his wearing out tactics come in. And he will try you on every corner, from every dimension and every direction. I'm telling you, yes, he will. Somebody put a question in this, says, can you forgive a person if they are dead?
Absolutely. That's up to you. Like you said, Michelle, it's for you.
It's for you.
Absolutely. That's a really good question. But I would say absolutely write them a letter, read it to them, and go through the whole process. Yeah.
You gotta want it. You can't have any excuses as to why. I'm telling you, I'm gonna send you that link. You can't have any excuses as to why you're still walking around with resentment and bitterness and being hateful to people that didn't do it to you, because you haven't chosen it. So if somebody's gone, you cannot go to them and apologize, right? But yes, you can, you can write the letter. In counseling, we have this thing called the empty chair exercise. When you sit there and you act like they're in the chair, you let them have it, and then you turn around and say, this is where I am. This is what I need. All of these different things. So you got to employ all the tools in your toolbox to make sure that you know how to walk in this life. Because if you want God to forgive you, certainly, you better start learning how to forgive other people, because by the same measure that you judge and the same measure that you forgive or don't forgive, it's going to be unto you. So
that's Bible. That's Bible.
That's Bible right there.
That's Bible. That's not Michelle. That's Bible.
That's what
Um,
it is.
but I did one exercise where I wrote a letter to the victims. So I used to rob and steal. That's why I used to. I was no criminal mastermind. I would just break a window and grab something, and
Passion grab.
or rob you. So and I was, some people look at me like, I'm not giving you nothing. I'd be like, okay, my bad. I just thought I'd ask, because I'm not, I'm like really not built like that. But I was desperate at the time. So,
You
but I
tried
wrote,
it.
I'm telling you, I wrote a letter to the victims of my crime, even though I paid my debt to society and all that. But I wrote a letter of apology to them, and these are people that I'm not going to track down and meet. But I took that letter and I went to a church in College Park. There's a church, and behind the church is a small graveyard, small cemetery behind the church. And I went into that cemetery. I went under a tree and dug a little hole in my hand and buried that letter.
Mm.
And what that symbolized was that that part of my life is dead and buried. And it's just one of those weird things. This is one of those exercises that, but you can do that thing. I mean, you could even, to the person who asked the question, maybe you could write the letter and take it to the gravesite and read it, and then maybe bury it. I don't know. I mean, whatever works. But there's a lot of different ways you can go through that process.
But that's the thing. When we take to heart and we put some physical action to
Yep.
something we're expecting to happen mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it gives it teeth, or it gives it
It does. It does.
some value. So you going to the graveyard and doing a literal thing for a figurative act in terms of the letter, it gives more weight to it. It tells you, okay, this is telling me that I'm really burying this.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, you telling people, or we used to burn it. Like we used to have these services, you would write something on a piece of paper and they would put it in a big pot and burn it and cover it up and it became ashes. And so you couldn't access it anymore. So if
Mm-hmm.
you put pain in there, if you put abandonment in there, if you put, sexual lifestyles or habits and all these, you put it in there and they burnt it symbolically,
Mm-hmm.
metaphorically, it is gone. And now when you see it and you've gone through the physical act, it takes on a whole different dimension for you, wherein you're able to grasp it and ingest it and digest it. As I tell my Bible study students, you got to ingest and digest the word, and you have to do the same thing with those things for you to get your healing. And so that was very key for you to
Mm-hmm.
actually go in and bury something that was figurative,
Mm-hmm.
but it had an effect on what was literal when it actually happened. Oh my God, our time is getting away. Our time is getting away. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking to James LeBlanc, who is the author of The Miracle. This book right here, let me tell you, oh, I got to turn around now.
Turn that thing around.
Turn around. This book called The Miracle. You
Mm-hmm.
can get it on Amazon. I promise you, I have thumbed through this book. I've marked on some pages. I said, oh, this right here is good. This might preach. Sorry, sir. I'll send you some time. But anyway, this is an amazing book. It's his story laid out flat out, and I promise you,
Mm-hmm.
you want to get your copy. This is, I think it's incumbent upon us to take people's moments and live for them. Again, we know that our test is a testimony. We don't go through stuff just for us. And I think it's important that you tell your story,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you can, catalog it like this, where people can have a tangible, representation of what you went through. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a reminder, even for you, the books that I've written, sometimes I go back to my own books. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that,
Yeah.
was good. Oh, that just delivered me all over again. you know but I want people to get your book and to really know that whatever your story is, whether it's drugs, whether it's sexual promiscuity, whether it's alternative lifestyles, whether it's adoption, abandonment, whatever it is, God is well able, and he is a miracle worker. Yes, he is. And James has written this book about his life entitled The Miracle. This camera is worrying me. Entitled The Miracle. And I want you all to go to Amazon and get your copy. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. It'll speak to every part of your life. It'll speak to all of your brokenness and your healing at the same time. Amen. This has been so good. If you want to reach out to James, You can visit his website at www.jamesmleblanc, that's LeBlanc.com. You can certainly send him an email, authorjmleblanc@gmail.com. That's author JMLEBLANC@gmail.com. Ladies and gentlemen, you want to get this book. It will bless your whole life. It will tell you about forgiveness. It will help you with your bitterness and your resentment so you can get over it. No, I'm just kidding. That's the worst thing to tell somebody. You don't tell them just get over it. So
No,
that you can walk through the process and get healed fully. You
that's
don't
it.
want to walk in partial forgiveness. You don't want to walk in partial anything. Because like I tell people, partial obedience is still disobedience. So,
Mm,
you
mm.
know, cut it out. So any last words for us, James, before we close out the show?
I think you said it all, Pastor Michelle. You definitely said it all in that last piece. And yeah, it's so freeing, and the miracles that follow when you truly, to the best of your ability, to forgive people. What God has in store is worth the price of admission right there. What He has in store, your mind can't even conceive. I would have sold myself short if I had just, because remember, all I asked for was to see a picture. That's all I wanted, just a picture. And when God flew my mom into BWI, He's like, exceedingly abundantly more. And
Yes.
I could go on and on, but it's a great life, a great walk. Once you free yourself of all that.
Well, before we close, let me just ask you about that first time meeting with your birth mother. How emotional, I mean, that's a dumb question, but I want to still know. How emotionally charged was that moment for you to, I mean, were you able to tell her you forgive her in person? I know you hugged her and cried. I know you did all of that. Walk us through it. Tell us. Oh,
Yeah, it was just a whole piece. It's my wife really found her. She's a detective, amateur detective, I think, and she found her. And as it turned out, I was conceived in Washington D.C. I didn't even know. My whole dad's side is in D.C., so I have all this family right here that I didn't even know about. And but when she flew in the first time, it was emotional. It was surreal, though. I'll be honest. It was surreal. It's like, because this was never going to happen for me. Remember, I'm disposable, and I'm a castaway, but God said no. He said no.
what God has for you is for you, sir.
Yep, and you're valuable, and I knitted you in your mother's womb, and what I have for you, I have from the foundations of the earth, and nothing was going to stop this from happening, and but it was all him. It was all him. He orchestrated the whole thing, but it was very emotional. Yeah, it was
But
amazing.
here's the thing we got to remind people is God's plan is always perfect. And there are no mistakes
Hmm.
in
That's
God
right.
because He has the power and the ability to rectify and restore.
Mm.
That's what He can do. In spite of us, in spite of what the world does to us, in spite of what we do to ourselves, He alone has the power to rectify and restore. He can do it if we just give it to Him. That's
Yeah.
all we got to do is just give it over to Him. I'm excited, James.
I'm
I
about to
tell
pass a plate around.
you.
I'm gonna take up this offering because you preached me happy today.
Let me tell you something. When it's in you, it's in you. But this has been such a blessing. I want to thank you all for tuning in. I've been talking to the one, the only, I'm saying that because he's on my show, the one and the only James LeBlanc. We have been talking about forgiveness, which we know is a difficult thing for the majority of people. But the fact that he was able to walk in it, to overcome it, to surpass it, and then to share it with others is a blessing that we can all take to heart. We all need to learn how to forgive and forget and to just let God do the work as we do the work alongside of Him. The Holy Ghost is ready, willing, and able if we just give ourselves over. Amen. So,
Amen.
if you are tuning in for the first time, I want to let you know that you can watch the show, the replay on YouTube on Life Matters with Michele TV official. Once again, Life Matters TV, Life Matters with Michele TV official. Go out there and like, subscribe, ring the bell. You can get notifications. If you want to reach out to me for counseling, For those of you who haven't already figured out, I'm a pastor preacher too. But you can reach out to me by email. You can go to my website at www.iam-mij/contact us. And if you would like to be a guest on the show, you can do the same. I am now scheduling people for September.
Yeah, you do get in front of it.
We are booked up to September. I mean, James told you, I booked him 6 months ago. It's like they were filling up just like this. He said, what about this day? I said, nope, that one's gone. You waited too long. Yep. And so 6 months. So if you would like to be on the show, please, ma'am, please, sir, visit my website at www.iam-mij.com/contact us and click on the little button that says Life Matters with Michele. James, thank you so much again for being my guest. It has been amazing. I am so excited about your journey. I'm excited about what God is going to do through your story. Don't let the enemy shut you up. I want you to share it, and then, share it.
Okay.
Tell the world, because there are many Jameses out there in male and female form that need to walk in forgiveness. You all right, ladies and gentlemen? This is our show. Once again, you can watch the replay on YouTube at Life Matters with Michele TV Official. You can also listen to it every Friday at 4 o'clock on sensationalsoundsradio.net. You can find me everywhere, because I'm not playing with this. I'm going out and I'm going to tell the world about what is going on. All right, this is Life Matters with Michele. I am your host, Michele Irby Johnson, and this is where we talk about what matters to you, and you. Have a blessed week. Happy Mother's Day again, mothers, and you all have a good one. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.